Hi, good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you, wherever you are in the world. Today's MLC, we're going to be talking about ways to measure your marketing tactics and how to report on the ROI. Today, we're going to have Dan Goldstein moderating the session. So Dan is the CMO of Avixa, which is a huge and very reputable trade body for the AV industry. And we've got some fabulous panelists as well joining us today to talk about exactly how do you report, how do you measure, and how do you report on your marketing tactics. So Dan, without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce your panelists and to crack on with the session.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you. Marketing attribution is one of those things that's becoming, I think, a little bit easier than it used to be. Marketing used to be a very kind of fluffy profession where we would talk about, things that were difficult to measure. But we were always confident, I think, about the impact, the positive impact that marketing could have on businesses. But I think in today's world, it is a lot easier for us to measure the different tactics and the different strategies that we deploy in order to grow revenue for the businesses that we work for. If anything, it seems to me that the pendulum has swung the other direction. There are now so many different ways of measuring and so many different things that we can report on that it can be really hard to focus our attentions on the things that really matter, and perhaps even harder to report on our successes and failures elsewhere in the business. So I'm going to be joined by three people today who I think have got great experience of this in their respective businesses. And we have Pete Lorenko, the Vice President of Marketing at Avid, Ronan Artman, the Vice President of Marketing at LiveView, and Jason Bradwell, who's the Senior Director of Group Marketing Communications at Delta Tray. And I'm going to start with Pete, who I hope is going to magically appear on the screen. Look at that, the wonders of digital broadcast technology. Pete, maybe you could just start off by introducing yourself and your company, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Dan. Hey, everyone. So Pete Lorenko, I am Charleston, South Carolina based. I'm currently VP of Marketing at Avid. Quickly on Avid. So Avid's a provider of software tools and solutions that's used primarily in creating content for TV, film, and music. Our global customer community spans some of the best known corporate brands, many logos that many of you probably watching or listening to this are familiar with, many well-known celebrity artists or creators, and then emerging individual creatives. And then really my role at Avid is a combination of marketing automation and operations. I lead the BDR team, which is the team that helps us qualify leads. And I also lead our paid media efforts. Previously, I had a role at Avid where I led all demand gen and content marketing.
So Pete, you've got, we were talking about this the other day, and it was kind of further re-emphasized to me when I started kind of digging a little bit deeper into Avid as a business. You've got a really, all marketing jobs are complicated, aren't they? But you've got a particularly complicated job because Avid has so many different routes to market. Can you talk a little bit about that and about what that means for you as a marketing team as you look at trying to measure ROI, when you've got so many different returns, if you like, that you're trying to show investment, return into?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of the things that attracted me to this role at Avid a little over a year and a half ago. But so to your point, Dan, Avid's got three go-to-market motions that really do complicate our marketing measurement and metric model. The first is a very traditional sales-led go-to-market motion where we have direct sellers who are typically selling into target enterprise accounts. Those accounts could be a combination of prospect and or customer logos. And obviously prospect is more of that net new, and customer, it's how do we drive cross-sell upsell activity. We then have partner and channel-led sales that can either be pulled into some of those sales-led motions or can be really sourced and driven directly by our wonderful channel and partner network, and shout out to many of them. What they do, especially over the last year with the pandemic, is truly incredible work. Mm-hmm. And then last but not least, we have a web store, or a shop, if you will, on our website. Mm-hmm. That's really aimed at selling our creative tool licenses to individuals. So think of it as selling, in most cases, a single license to a user. So when you kind of translate those go-to-market motions, it definitely makes marketing measurement complicated. The way I like to explain it, and kind of the goals that we really have at Avid today in terms of marketing measurement is, first and foremost, we've been on our own journey in terms of evolving our ability to demonstrate a stronger impact on revenue. Mm-hmm. And the way we are striving to do that is really think about our measurements in two buckets. The first is, what are those core metrics that are really our marketing goals are kind of tied back or translated to company goals, right? And the way I like to, best thing about company goals is typically these are mainly financial in nature, although they could be other things. And that translation for marketing is, how much pipeline do we need to help contribute? How much revenue do we need to contribute? And then, we also have specific marketing measurements tied to these things, like how many net new logos do we need to help source? So some of the key core metrics behind this, Dan, that we look at are things like web store sales, mm-hmm. How many inbound leads we've generated, how many score leads we've generated, because I'm sure, I know Jason and Ronan will probably talk to this too. There is a difference in an inbound hand raiser, demo request, or sales lead, right? Our inbound contact us, than score lead, where you're trying to predict what you perceive someone's buying intent or buying readiness is. So we do track both of those, and we want to measure and see what the conversion rate of those are, and kind of really the last two core metrics, which are conversion to pipeline and pipeline to revenue. And then
go ahead, Pete.
Go ahead. One last thing, and then we have secondary metrics, and those are really meant to help us measure the impact of like brand and demand programs. Those are important because everyone in marketing shares that core goal, right? How are we collectively as a team helping drive pipeline and revenue and those core metrics we talked about? Those secondary metrics are important in terms of helping measure the long-term impact that, for example, an awareness campaign would have, because we know that those programs take a lot longer. It could take months. It could take a year plus to see that type of impact. It's also, those secondary metrics are key to helping individuals know the impact that they're having on core goals. So we do look at measuring both. But as you said, Dan, at the beginning, it's tricky, right? And with the explosion of data, mm-hmm. and a lot of challenges around attribution, et cetera, it poses its own set of challenges.
Certainly. Yeah, one thing that strikes me about the different routes to market that you have is, mm-hmm. is they each one poses its own set of challenges. You could look at what I'll just term your B2C route to market, which is your e-commerce, your store. You're marketing directly to the end customer there, and I would have thought that's a relatively easy thing to map out, although, as you say, it would take a long time. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got the work that you do with your channel partners, where they may be doing quite a lot of the marketing lift themselves. They may be on a completely different marketing platform from the one that you're on. They may have their own KPIs, which are different from yours. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for you as an organization, and do you look at harmonizing all that into a single set of metrics, or do you treat them all separately because they all need to be handled separately? So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of in an evolution. Mm-hmm. So historically, we kind of had two core levels of metrics. We had our web store metrics, which truthfully are a lot easier for us to measure attribution all the way through to sale. Right. So, right. For example, if we're running a paid social campaign on Facebook or yep. LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter, whatever it might be, that metric in terms of return on investment, ad creative and the frequency of ads being seen, and that conversion of audience or ad creative into actual purchases from the web store perspective, Dan, clean. Candidly, since I've been at Avid and really over my tenure here, our web store results and performance, we're really confident in those. We have a really good feel for those. And we've gotten to a point where we're really effective, and kudos to that, to the digital team that mm-hmm. helps drive a lot of this. We've gotten really good about being able to predict based on historical sales, the types of channels that we're using and the budget assigned to those channels, what we predict that web store
volume will be. And I'd say with a pretty damn good level of accuracy. What's trickier is when it's partner-led or more of that traditional kind of sales-led. And our journey is really, what we're trying to harmonize around, if you will, is a bigger focus on if we can really maximize true demand creation, which results in getting more traffic to our site, through podcasts and brand building campaigns as a whole, and then really strategic demand efforts, whether that's through paid social or webinars or partner, co-marketing type events with partners. How do we educate and engage people over time where a portion of them are going to come to our site when they're ready and say, hey, Dan, I want to talk to somebody.
Right.
And I can tell you, we've seen a big uplift in my tenure in Contact Us. Conversely, we want to, we are still a big believer that, demand capture, while great, may not always satisfy the pipeline and revenue goals that we have. So we are trying to supplement that with more traditional outbound marketing, right? Through a combination of ABM or kind of target market outreach, as well as using technology that helps us identify accounts through like intent data that may be in market that isn't part of our target account list. And we're feeding this as scored activity. And what we're really measuring there is, as part of this evolution, we've been working to fix lead management processes and lead routing processes. And it's really just tracking how effective is scored in inbound leads, that conversion to revenue, whether it's to a partner or whether it's to a direct seller. So the harmonization is really coming together to show a story of here's what's the web store impact and what channels are driving, et cetera. Vice versa, here's the success of inbound versus scored. Again, what's that impact on pipeline and closed won revenue? And it's a journey because attribution's tricky, et cetera. So we're kind of starting right now and we're focused on that top line, which is being able to tell that top line story, while we continue to evolve and improve our ability to measure those secondary metrics, which is like, for example, on the podcast, we know that we get X number of podcast episode downloads, et cetera. We get some qualitative feedback from people that listen to it or from like a sales rep, et cetera. But there's limitations. Like you don't have the actual audience of who listened to that podcast and did they convert to your, pipeline and revenue. So it's not perfect in the secondary metrics, but that's where we're continuing to evolve it, Tim.
This makes a ton of sense, to me as a CMO. It's fascinating to listen to. One thing I do want to ask you before I go over to our other panelists, Pete, is what about talking to the non-marketers in your organization when you're reporting on all this to say sales or your executive team? It's a complicated picture. You're using terminology that may not be familiar to those people.
Yeah.
What do you need to do in terms of translating what we were just talking about? How easy is that? And do you need to filter? Do you need to prioritize, simplify?
Yeah, so it's definitely challenging. I think we've all likely at some point in our careers experienced the challenges of it. At Avid, we've moved to a BU model. So one way that we're tackling this is we have shared goals across the BU, and that's some of what I was referencing earlier, where there's a aligned to those BU and corporate goals. There's a marketing component of what we're trying to drive in terms of marketing goals. So our report out, Dan, which happens on a monthly and quarterly basis, is really a summary of how we're doing against those shared goals.
Got you.
Again, we're kind of in that improving phase of really, improving the data, improving our lead management processes, et cetera, over time. No different than I'm sure you're going to hear from my two peers here in a second. And there's challenges, especially if you have long sales cycles. But I'd say the good thing is we've recently adapted an internal process here where aligned to the BUs, we do BU level reporting. And we focus on the same metrics I mentioned: lead, pipeline, revenue. Don't overcomplicate it. My own guidance to the audience would be, we try to not make lead creation or lead volume the core metric we look at. So that's not the only metric that we really talk about. It's really that combination of, here's how many leads we're generating, or here's how much traffic's coming into the web store. Here's our web store cart conversion rates, et cetera. Here's our traditional lead conversion rates.
Right.
And here's that impact on pipeline revenue.
Right. And it's that shared, if I understand you correctly, it's that shared context of a set of core business unit goals, which makes that easy for the rest of the group to understand.
Totally. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Well, thank you, Pete. We will come back to you, of course. Want to bring in Ronan from Live U? No, in fact, yes, no. I was going to go to Ronan. Let's see if we can bring Ronan in. As we do that, just want to remind the audience, anyone who's watching and listening, if you're finding this as fascinating as I am, but you also have further questions, as I do, please add them to the chat, and our hosts will look at those, and we'll see if we can get our panel to answer them as we move forward with the session. So Ronan, looks like we may be having a little bit of a challenge seeing you and hearing you, or I am anyway, whether it's at my end or at your end. Jessica, can you fill us in? You're muted, I think.
I think we'll go to Jason first whilst Ronan sorts out his tech issues, if that's okay. We
can totally do that, assuming that Jason hasn't gone to get a glass of water.
That would have been funny, wouldn't it?
That's right. Hi, Jason. So, Jason Bradwell, you are at Delta Trade, which is a fascinating company, majoring in sports, but also working in entertainment, and offering what looks to me like a very comprehensive suite of online content and production solutions for those customers. Just hearing, what kind of Pete was talking about at Avid, where are the similarities for you with what Pete was talking about, and where is Delta Trade different in the way that your marketing team looks at ROI and reporting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hearing Pete speak, we share a lot of the same. We have a lot of similarities to Avid in that we are a complex business. As you mentioned, Delta Tray operates on what we call the glass to glass spectrum. So really anything to do with the creation, distribution, and consumption of professional content, professionally produced content, video content primarily, falls into our bag. We're doing everything from putting cameras into football stadiums to capture match data that rights owners and rights holders can use to enhance the fan experience. We're doing broadcast graphics for television. We're building owned and operated digital ecosystems for many of the tier 0, tier 1 sports and entertainment providers in the world. And when you've got such a complex value proposition that is spread across the globe, as Delta Tray has and has had for the 35 years that we've been around, it certainly makes attribution a tricky thing to nail down. I think, as Pete said, it's never going to be perfect, right? You're never going to find that silver bullet that's going to solve your attribution woes, but you can get pretty damn close. And it's from our experience, an investment in the technological infrastructure that we use in the marketing team and across the sales team to measure where leads and opportunities are coming into our database and how they're then interacting once they're in our world. And communication, across both sales, marketing, and the leadership and executive team on, what exactly is going on. You can measure quantitatively a lot of stuff, and you can get a little bit drowned in it, to be honest. But with a company like Delta Tray that does so much and operates across such long sales cycles, we're talking big B2B enterprise technology products here that could take anything from 6 months to, even 3 years sometimes, with media rights cycles to nail down. That communication between those three parties, marketing, sales, and the executive team on, what can we quantitatively measure, but also qualitatively, what are we hearing from the sales team, the customer success team, the leadership team, our investors, as to what's going on in the world, and how our customers are engaging with us and viewing us is equally important.
It seemed to me that, when I was on the site earlier today, that the life seems a little bit simpler. I'm not going to say that it's simple for you, because it's clearly not. But unless I've missed something, and I may have done, it looks like Delta Trade doesn't have that very easy attribution that Avid has with its e-commerce, click to buy, direct to consumer, communication and conversion. You're basically working through a sales team. You're working through relationships. You're responsible for generating leads and then pursuing those down through the pipeline. It seems to me like your challenge is more around, like you said, the length of the pipeline, and the longer a journey becomes, the easier it is to lose track of the attribution, right? Is there a truth in that? It seems to me that would be logical.
100%. I think there is very little that marketing and communications can do on their own that will result in net new business immediately, right? We won't publish a blog post and then get a check in the post the next day for our broadcast graphic solutions. It's very much a collaborative effort over the long term between marketing and sales and the executive team in order to nurture those relationships and quantify the success of our efforts. Everything's measurable, let's be clear about that, but it's about the time scales in which that measurement is taking place. As a business, we've been around, as I say, for 3.5 decades. The sooner that we can get people into our CRM and into our ecosystem, with the more effective we can be in terms of measuring their engagement over that period of time, and that eventually when they do convert to a potential customer, we can map that journey back to when did they enter our world and what journey did they go on to get to the point where they became a client.
Just to go back to a question that I asked Pete, because I think it's something that I'm going to ask all of you. I think it's really important. Because it's something that as marketers, I think we all find can be interesting, let's just say, and potentially challenging. And you talked about it already, that communication of results to a team that has not necessarily got the marketing expertise that your team has, Jason. How easy is that? Is that for you? Are you challenged sometimes? Do you feel in getting your message across, or is it that you've got that kind of shared context, you've got shared business goals, and you can you can have a very good 2-way or 3-way conversation with sales and your executives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just drawing back to what Pete said, all marketing and sales goals need to be tied to the company and the business goals. In our experience, and it sounds very similar to Pete, it's just about keeping things as simple as possible. You can create some beautiful dashboards that talk to all the amazing stuff that's happening across your social media accounts, across your website, across your email marketing, your events, all of this stuff. And it's all very important to measure and track as a marketing communications team. How much of that is necessary for the business development, sales, executive team to know on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis is something that you really need to evaluate, because you can just drown people in data, and instead you need to just cut through. You need to cut through to what's important for us at Delta Train, and Pete again said this is going to be the same for every B2B marketing team out there. It comes down to business results. How many leads can we bring into the pipeline? How many of them can we qualify? Because it's not a numbers game; it's about quality. We can create dozens, hundreds of names into a list and send them over. But if 0.01% of them are actually relevant, we're just wasting people's time. So, what are those 2-3 what I call North Star metrics that actually are going to show people that there is momentum behind what we're working on, that trifecta of groups of people all care about, can you share on a regular basis and have that conversation around? And usually that is, revenue-based metrics.
Right. Such a difficult balancing act, isn't it? Because like Pete, your group generates a lot of content marketing, a lot of stuff around, blogs and webinars and those sorts of things. The kinds of things that could bring you a lot of quantity, and yet, you obviously feel you need to do that, because you know, if it was just about building a few relationships with a few key people, sales could probably do that, and you wouldn't need a marketing team.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have definitely benefited from a huge investment in content marketing and social media marketing, both from a budgetary and a people standpoint. And
right.
for us, it is, you know, the future of what B2B marketing should be. Anyone can send out, you know, a highly technical tech spec or product feature comparison set or anything like that.
Right.
But then it just becomes a question of, for the buyer, you know, it's a race to the bottom on price primarily. Instead, as a brand, can we, through our content and our social media marketing, build authority that, you know, there's a reason we've been around for 3.5 decades, and so many of the major media properties in the world use us to power their ecosystems. Let's take some of that knowledge that exists across the 1,000 amazing people who work here, and let's put it out into the world and deliver value. And to Pete's point, you know, that is a long-term play. You know, as I said, you know, you're not going to publish a blog post or a white paper and see a check coming through the post the next day, but it's an important step in the process of building that relationship over the long term. And for that, you need an ecosystem and an infrastructure, a digital marketing infrastructure in place to fulfill it. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you for giving us opening a window into your world. I'm going to bring Pete back into this because unfortunately it looks like Ronan has lost power at home. Perils of doing this all this broadcasting from home. One reason why I actually came into the office today was I wasn't sure whether the home situation was going to be up to this, but now that I've got the two of you, we'll hope to be able to bring Ronan into this at some point. We've got another 30 minutes still to go. Just a reminder as we move forward, please ask questions in the chat as we continue this conversation. One thing I did want to do, ask both of you, and perhaps Pete, you can kind of speak to this first. Having good reporting, being able to see all your numbers, having the dashboards, having the all these data points at our fingertips is all very well, but they have to drive action in order to be useful, right? You have to take decisions and say, well, this series of webinars really didn't work. We're not going to do that anymore because none of those leads actually converted. Can each of you give us an example maybe of how your attribution efforts have driven decision making? What sorts of decisions you took? Pete, can you?
Let me start with one that's a little out of the box. So, as I mentioned, one of our big focus areas is inbound leads, which for us we have less of a demo request type of options, more of a contact sales experience. So leading the BDR team, I'll be curious what Jason's example is, by the way, but leading the BDR team, one of the things I was hearing, Dan, pretty regularly was this direct feedback that, hey, we love that the volume of inbound leads are up, but it feels like a larger and larger percentages are non-sales related. And, you know, we had at the time a very traditional contact sales form. We were trying to minimize the number of fields that we ask, and that was sort of it. It was just basic contact information. And so what was happening was I had no way to really quantify their feedback with true data, besides looking at how many leads that were being routed to them and what the outcome was in terms of conversion of pipeline or revenue. So one of the changes we made, Dan, we actually implemented this at the start of this year. So I have some data I can speak to. We added some new fields to the form. For example, a field that's called contact reason, or I think it's like inquiry reason. And what we're basically trying to track is this inquiry sales related or is it non-sales related? Because listen, if it's non-sales related, we respect that. We want to make sure that we help get you to the proper place so you can get that support and feedback or whatever you're looking for as quick as possible. Vice versa, if it's sales, I want to maximize time on phone. So Dan, with that insight, we now have the ability to quantify what percentage of those leads are truly sales and non-sales. And I don't want to cite that actual percentage on this call, but
sure.
how that's also impacted us is it's changed the way we do lead management. It's also potentially opened up the opportunity for us to look at other opportunities that we can leverage the BDR team for, because maybe initially if we were solely basing BDR staffing solely on volume, well, now that you can quantify what percentage of that volume is sales or non-sales, maybe now I could take Jason, if he's a BDR, sorry, Jason, and say, hey, we want to use you for X, right? Or maybe go do some prospect activity or whatever it might be. So Dan, that's one example. I'm happy to share others if needed, but that's a real-time one that has been very eye-opening for us in the last several months.
It's so interesting, isn't it, as well? Because every marketing best practice Bible that you could possibly cite would say, minimize the number of fields on your inbound inquiry form. Don't make it hard for people to subscribe. Just get them into your system, and then start off a drip campaign. But actually, it seems like in your case, just adding a question or two just filters people out or sends them in different directions, and that's actually more manageable for you as a business, which is a great example of metrics in action, if you like.
I'll wrap it quickly up, and I'll be curious what Jason's thoughts are. But the way I like to think of marketing, part of it outside of reporting, is it's all about delivering experiences that people want, right? And so Dan, while I still think there's room to improve our form, there's still a lot more fields on there than I personally like.
Right.
Shout out to technology platforms. I'm sure they're going to contact me and try to sell me on how to reduce the form fields. But our goal has been in adding those fields. It wasn't to, I realize we probably may be losing some conversion, and we do track that as well, visitor to form conversion rates. But it was, Dan, with the goal of how do we improve that experience? Again, if you're a non-sales related inquiry, I want to make sure I get you to support or to the web store team or to a partner. If you need to talk to a specific partner, you're just having a hard time figuring that process out. That's the intention of making that change. It wasn't to put up another barrier to restrict you filling out that form. Like, that would be the worst case scenario. So that's really the logic for why we made it, and the intelligence that we're getting and the data is gravy. But remember, I'll leave it with, it all came away from me getting on a call with the BDRs, listening to some of the calls and meetings myself, and realizing, hey, I keep hearing this feedback. I need to quantify it now. And then it led to evolving the journey for customers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you, Pete. Jason, do you have does that ring true to you, or do you have a different example that you're able to share of attribution resulting in action?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to Pete's point, and to your point, Dan, logic would seem to suggest that the more forms you put onto a field, the worse it's going to be. And you would expect to see a steep decline in the amount of people who are actually converting. But I think it's about what's on the other end of that form. If you're delivering value, and you're creating something that really it will make their lives easier, or better, or make them more informed, then if it's just a couple of extra drop-down boxes, it's usually not too steep a hill to overcome. And we had the same kind of conversation, Pete. When we were pulling together our forms for things like white papers and case studies. Do we just start with just first name, email, or just email, and testing that against what happens if we have a form that's got 5 or 6 fields. Half of them are optional, half of them are required: email, company, first name. And you didn't see too much of a difference really between the two. And in fact, a good number of people who are registering or submitting that form were still, filling out the optional fields, because it was just a drop-down menu, and it took them, less than half a second to actually go ahead and click that. So yeah, I think we maybe sometimes work ourselves up a little bit too much in, what's going to turn people off, and really until you put it into practice, you don't know. But I've had a similar experience to Pete in that regard. In terms of how attribution has affected our decision making, I'll come in with a little bit of a left field example. One of the problems that companies like Delta Tray face is getting case studies pulled together, and building that kind of credibility through our work. I always say that if we could go out and talk about all the amazing stuff that we're doing across the world for all these clients, I would have the easiest job in the world.
Right.
And maybe then I would submit case studies and see checks coming into the post the next day. But because because we're working with predominantly clients who, particularly in the sports world, have brand sponsorships in place and are being paid for the right to be associated with that name, it is absolutely quite right for that company to say to a technology vendor, we can't do a conventional case study or press release with you lest we risk that relationship. So we with that problem in mind, how do we build credibility when we have a situation where customers' hands are tied? We found that when we were going to customers and saying to them, can we do a case study or can we do a press release or something, usually the answer would be no. When we started experimenting with how do we co-create content with our customers, either guest blog posts, a podcast we launched, the conversation became a lot more agreeable because we were flipping the intent of that ask from how can we make Delta Tray look great to how can we make you look great? How can we share your expertise, your view of the market with the world? And so it was a little bit more. It was less a decision guided by hard, cold data that was coming in through our CRM platform, and more just kind of qualitative intuition that if we flip the narrative on its head and made it about them, customers would become more receptive to our co-marketing efforts, and we would then benefit from the halo effect of being associated with those clients in the public domain. And we went on, as I said, to launch a podcast to that effect, do a bunch of co-authored written content. And it actually culminated last year in a virtual event that we ran with one of our partners, where we got 6 of the biggest names in sport on the virtual stage, spitting wisdom about what's happening in the market. So going from that challenge of how do we demonstrate that credibility to saying how let's flip this on its head and make it about our customers, to them benefiting from that halo effect of being associated with them in the public sphere. That's a campaign that kind of sticks out in my mind as how we used our insights to guide our decision making.
That's really interesting, isn't it, Jason? It's the difference between old-fashioned product endorsement and the more, in my mind, the more modern approach of kind of brand association, where you're aligning your brand with the bigger brand, but you're not asking the bigger brand to kind of partner down with you, if for want of a better way of looking at it. Yeah, it's really, really interesting.
And then just to finish that thought, and then as a carry on for that, again, we're an enterprise organization, so the main part of our job in marketing is to equip our sales team with the tools they need to go out there and prospect. All of that content is amazing, are amazing tools in their arsenal to approach other clients or potential clients in this case, with effectively what is a case study, but positioned more as a value piece of content rather than a look at us kind of piece of content. Yeah,
absolutely. That's great. Thank you, Jason. I think Ronan is now able to join us. So what I'm going to do is add you, Ronan, to the panel rather than have an individual interview with you, which could be a little bit time consuming given the time constraints that we're under. But thank you for making whatever efforts you've had to make in order to join us.
No, really thanks. Yeah. Pete was making a remark at the beginning of the conversation about gas, and suddenly electricity went out. So I don't know, Pete, maybe you have some magic or anything.
I do not control the gas issue that's happening on the East Coast.
I don't know. For a minute, I felt that there is a correlation between the two, but that's fine.
That's fine. Yes, lots of things that we, as marketers, we can't control.
Exactly.
As we have found, power supply of whatever form being one of them. Ronan, I don't know whether you've been able to listen to the conversation as it's been going on, but I wondered if you could just very briefly talk about what Pete and Jason have been able to do, which is to talk about how when you've looked at how you attribute different marketing tactics to results. Can you give us an example at LiveView of where you've analyzed results of marketing and those results have resulted in decision making or a change of tactics and that evolution of your marketing strategies?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I will take a very short time because I lost my slide. Getting back to I think when you opened the conversation, you said marketing used to be very, very fluffy kind of thing. I remember the days where I tried to make that everything is, marketing by data. And by that time I said, even the numbers of PR that we need to issue per year, something that I'm counting on. But the days have changed, obviously, and we all right now really, really looking at numbers and really looking at every campaign that we are doing and see what works, what channels works better than the others. I'll make just, we are as a B2B company. When I counted, like in 2019, we were supposed to do in 2020 about 102 exhibitions, and that was, I think, one of the fundamentals ways for us to actually generate leads. But when you're looking at the numbers and right now, looking back, and obviously the cost for the cost per acquisition, and on exhibitions, which could be anywhere between $800 to $1,000. It's amazing. So when you look right now back and you see, how content creation, webinars, and things, even SEM and obviously obviously emails, how they have been, I think, playing the biggest role in the COVID-19 times, and we've been able to generate more MQLs in 2020 than we have been able to generate on the old days of the exhibitions. So I don't know where the discussion went, but we are really focusing on generating, qualified MQLs and really work on the funnel within our boundaries and really work on nurturing workflow within our boundaries. And then that's, I think, the shift from exhibitions into what we did with that was a tremendous kind of shift within marketing. And it took us, I think in a matter of a couple of weeks, we had to shift our entire marketing way of doing things into adapting into COVID-19 times. So again, I don't know where the discussion went, but that's kind of a little bit of my perspective on how we measuring the success. And I think with doing things like webinars and SEM and emails and things like that, you can really, really look at the ROI of those one in a much better way, in a much better fashion than we used to do when those exhibitions went out, and it was really, really hard to measure the ROI.
That's really interesting, Ron. And I think what we all have in common, right, is as marketers is a set of assumptions that are probably deeply embedded in each of our brains, and we're not really necessarily conscious of the fact that we're acting upon them, but they are all there, and so Jason's got an assumption of case studies are difficult. Pete's got an assumption of what the optimal number of questions on a form is. You've got an assumption that trade shows are a must-have, or you because you've never worked without them, and suddenly something comes along that forces you to challenge those assumptions and or find a different way of getting the results that you need. And from that point of view, I will say I think the last 14 months as difficult as they've been for everybody in the world, there are silver linings. They've definitely forced marketing teams all over the world, not just in our industry, to explore different avenues, to look at different ways of measuring, and to look at different tactics in a new light. So that I think is really interesting. And of course, what they've done, and I know this is something that you've probably all got an opinion on. It would be good to get a sense of where this landscape is and how it's shifted over the last 12, 14 months. Our dependence on technology platforms as marketers has probably never been higher, right? Just because the in-person, those softer, fluffier, relationship-based sales and marketing efforts have not been available to us, or have been available to us in a much more limited way in virtual ways that I think we've all found are not that effective. What kind of software tools are we finding valuable in terms of measuring attribution, and has there been an evolution there over the last year or so? Pete, maybe you could kick us off there.
Yeah, so we have I would call a core set of technology, and I guess I'm going to name platforms. I don't know any other way to describe them, but
no, let's go ahead.
So we have our market automation platform. For us, it's Marketo. Obviously, there's alternatives like Eloqua, HubSpot, etc. For us, Marketo is really the core of how we manage our marketing database, as well as primarily all of our email communications today. Although we are evolving that, and I'll speak to that in a second, depending on other tools. We have a CRM, which is really our, I guess I'll describe it as our one source or view of the truth for our business, right? Kind of everything flows through Salesforce.
Yes.
For us, that's salesforce.com. Obviously, there's alternatives to that as well. And then some of the other big technology for us, before I get into a reporting tool on top of all this, or two, is 6sense. So 6sense is our account engagement platform. I think I referenced it at one point earlier. We are using 6sense as really a combination of helping us measure and track not only what named accounts are doing, not only with us, but potentially on the web in terms of keywords, engagement with, etc. But conversely, helping us, no different than other intent tools do, helping us identify or measure accounts that may be in market that aren't on our named account list. And our objective with that is sort of like that idea I was talking about earlier about score leads versus inbound leads. It's a version of almost like a scored lead parameter for us, where if we identify that's an in-market account, we want to track and see, hey, if they're showing what we believe is predicting buying intent, then let's see if how accurate that model is, and we'll feed those types of leads to marketing and sales outreach and see what those conversions are. The way we're doing the reporting on top of that, so we're using Google Analytics to do a lot of our assessment of web data, web traffic, all this stuff. I'm sure Jason and Ronan can speak to similar types of things. We're also using GA and things like Google Console to roll up a lot of our paid media results. Obviously, when we do like paid social campaigns, etc., like Facebook and LinkedIn, we're using Facebook Business Manager, we're using AdWords.
The proprietary
We're rolling a lot of that insight into GA. And then last but not least for us would be Domo. Obviously, there's competitive alternatives like Tableau and others out there. Domo for us is visualizing Salesforce data, but in a lot more customized, cleaner way. And I'd say, one message here, at least for Avid as a business, is Domo and Salesforce, for example, are being used throughout the entire organization. This isn't just tools for marketing. I think that probably helps justify some steeper price tags. So like, for example, Domo is a tool that marketing uses, but it's actually owned by a different department, kind of our revenue and commercial operations business team. And that's being used to help visualize all of our data, from churn and renewal to sales forecasting to marketing metrics, all that stuff. So I won't go through, there's others, but those are like the core tools and platforms for us.
Cool. Jason, what's your technology landscape right now, and how has it evolved over the last 12, 14 months, would you say? Oh, looks like we just lost Jason.
I'm back. Sorry.
Back.
My Wi-Fi dropped out, so apologies. I missed the end of Pete's sentence there.
So you just finished off, Pete, I was going to just pose that same question to you. I think, Pete, you were talking about Domo and data visualization you being used across the company. So that was the last piece of your technology jigsaw puzzle.
Yep.
Great. I mean, look, a lot of the tools and platforms, Pete, that you just mentioned there, are similar to the types of tools that we use here at Delta Tray. So I'll save us all another laundry list of products and tools. What I will say is, we within Delta Tray have been on a transformational journey in terms of how we utilize our technology stack to power our marketing efforts, where we started in a world where we were using multiple tools for each component of what we were trying to do. So right. We have one tool for email, one tool for landing page creation, one tool for social media management, one tool for this, one tool for that. And I guess my advice to anyone listening to this is the sooner you can get into a place where you're consolidating as much of that into one platform as possible, the easier your life will be from a marketing kind of attribution point of view. We did struggle with mapping that kind of customer journey when you've got a bunch of different platforms in place that all have their own kind of sets of analytics, and
right.
Having to almost go back to spreadsheets to try and pull that picture together. When you move on to kind of a central marketing platform like a Marketo or a HubSpot or something like that, it is very simple for people like me who are non-technical to get up and running and actually start generating meaningful insights around what's going on across your marketing ecosystem. It was when we moved from multiple to few really powerful tools, it was almost like night and day. From the time I was spending on a day-to-day basis trying to paint that picture to just pressing a few buttons, generating a report, and boom, I can now go to the sales team with, here are all the qualified leads that are of interest to you, to my executive team saying, here is the ROI on such and such campaign. So, you're never going to have one tool that does it all. Sure. That would be a fallacy, but trying to, there's that beautiful diagram that's done by HubSpot. I think guy's name is Scott, kind of the director of platform infrastructure or something over there.
Scott Brinker, yeah.
Scott Brinker, that's it, yeah. And every year that's got all the logos for all the different MarTech tools out there, and every year it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think it was 5,000 marketing technology tools at last count, which is just crazy. And every one of them is going to promise to solve your problems.
Yeah.
But it's not about a tool, it's about how you use that tool. And if you are in a situation where you've got 20, 30, 40 of them to manage across all these little slivers of your efforts, you're just going to spend more time in busy work than you are in anything else.
Yeah, very, very true. Certainly speak to that. Ronan, does that ring bells?
Yeah, it's very resonant to me. I'll start by saying that I came to know MarTech. The definition of that took me a while, and now I have a person in my team that actually is doing MarTech, and he's totally doing just that. But I completely agree with Jason. We've been playing with HubSpot and a lot of laundry lists of technologies, and we I think 2 years ago we decided to standardize everything across the Salesforce and Pardot. The entire team works on Salesforce. Marketing works on Pardot. It's not the best one. Obviously we compare it to other platforms like HubSpot, but we try to do our best within the platform. And I think one of the key things that we worked with our IT department to build a dashboard and an executive dashboard that every morning when I come to work, I can actually open the dashboard and look on the performance on a single glance and see a full-blown kind of picture of where we are with MQLs, with everything, and then with the performance on the regional ones, on the what campaigns are doing better than the others. And I think, and I completely agree with Jason, when you try to standardize, because each of one landing page sometimes we're doing in a different format, because it gives us a lot of creativity, and to do, and then sometimes Perdot doesn't give you the flexibility. But regardless of that, when you standardize over one platform, it makes your life easier as a CMO, and really benefit from getting one glance on everything that you're doing. And we all work with probably tons of others, pretty much the same. But that will be my key take for MarTech.
Yeah, Dan, if I could add two quick things playing off Ronan and Jason's points. One, couldn't agree more. I think Jason nailed it. Don't buy technology and thinking it's going to magically solve your marketing and sales goals. That's not the key, and it's hard. I think Jason says he's not techie, but there's some marketing tech and RevOps gurus out there, and hats off to them. The first thing I like to think about is look and evaluate technology when a business need or requirement forces that hand. It's sort of the same logic of recruit for new talent when you kind of hit your capacity, right? And there's just no more time in the day, or your resources are strapped to be able to. So the same logic with technology. I think conversely, don't be afraid to use consultants or third-party firms if needed to help you figure some of this out. Said a different way, this stuff is hard. Attribution is difficult. There's a lot of data points out there, right? I think I've seen a stat before. Most marketing reporting gets heavily skewed by digital, but usually your digital program is only a percentage of your spend, right? And if you're doing webinars or some of what Jason was talking about earlier, that's not going to be relevant necessarily in a digital report. But so what ends up happening is you have marketers that talk a lot and show a lot of digital results, but struggle to show the results for other activity. So because this topic of attribution is so tricky, and we could probably spend another hour just talking about attribution and lead sources and all that fun stuff, my biggest guidance has been, when needed, I don't try to tackle all this myself. That's where I'm not afraid to bring in like a firm or bring in experts to help us tackle some of it.
Right.
Or give us advice on platforms to look at and things like that.
Yeah, we've certainly done that at Avixa too. So Jason, Ronan, Pete, thank you so much for your time and your insight. I think if I could summarize that last point, it sounds to me like, don't think that any technology platform is going to solve all your problems. Don't fret about getting the absolute best piece of technology for each purpose. But think about having commonality of platforms across the organization and making sure that you have integration where you need it. It would seem to be the big takeaway for me. So thank you again. It's been a wonderful hour. Jessica, I'm going to hand this one back to you.
Thank you so much. Such sound advice from all of our panelists, and thanks, Dan, for doing a fabulous job moderating this evening. It's been really interesting, super interesting session. And if you, as always, if you're not a member of Marketing Leaders Circle yet, please sign up at mlcircle.com. We would welcome CMOs, marketing directors, heads of marketing to be part of this really valuable network. So please join and we can continue the conversation there. Thank you very much again to all our panelists. Thanks, Dan, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you very much.